Telecast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's Telecast. On this week's show, Sabrina Duguet, Executive Vice President of Asia Pacific for All3Media International, joins me alongside Amanda Groom, Managing Director of The Bridge. Peter White from Deadline joins us with the latest TV news from Hollywood. And K7 Media's Girts Licis also looks at the Asia Pacific and the trends and opportunities that exist there. It's all coming up on this week's Telecast. So my guests on this week's show are both experts in the development and distribution of TV content in the Asian market, an area that we haven't visited yet on Telecast. Sabrina Duguet is Executive Vice President of Asia Pacific for All3Media International, the distribution arm of All3Media. Sabrina and her team are both responsible for finished programming and format sales in the region. Amanda Groom is founder and managing director of The Bridge. The company bridges international media markets between East and West, specialising in TV and film co-production. The Bridge incubates new creative IP and amplifies East-West creative opportunities, acts as a shortcut to Asian public and private funding, and secures worldwide broadcast and commissioning partners. Sabrina and Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you for having us.
Great to have you on the show. Amanda, if we can start with you, tell everybody a little bit about The Bridge and what you do.
I founded The Bridge, about a decade ago now. The Bridge serves as a bridge between UK, US and Asia. It enables a shortcut, if you like, to the partner companies that we have across Southeast and Northeast Asia. Really, it delivers access to multiple opportunities. If you like, we sit on that paper wall between East and West, advantaging both sides as they look to access each other.
Okay. And how have you found the last few weeks, once the pandemic's hit, how have you found that's affected business?
Gosh, look, the pandemic has stopped everything in terms of production. I think global co-production has really been at the forefront of problems and still very much is with travel restrictions. So I had 2 feature films and 4 series, 2 of them lifestyle, 2 drama, and they are all now on hold. So my role over the last few months really has been keeping these balls in the air as much as I possibly can. There is still great uncertainty, not about production, but about quarantine entry and restrictions on travel. So it's been pretty tough, really, and we just hope that we're beginning to find our way out of it.
Okay. Oh, well, fingers crossed for that. And it does seem slowly but surely in territories around the world that we're seeing every week that perhaps things are getting a little bit easier. Well, that brings us on to your first story of the week and that production starting and resuming across some parts of Asia. Take us through the latest on that.
Yes, well, I've chosen a story from Content Asia. It's one of their features on production resuming around Asia. And it's a good news story. Thank goodness things are getting up and running again. If anything, they're getting up probably faster in Asia than they are in both Europe and the US. So this particular story runs through each Asian territory, which I won't go through. But what really struck me is that there are some notable differences. I mean, for example, Hong Kong and Taiwan both kept their infections right down, very low. And yet Hong Kong production is still at a bit of a standstill, whereas Taiwan has kept filming throughout. And I'm also particularly interested in how a lot of Asian regions are beginning to focus on, or content is being shaped around relationships under pressure of lockdown. I mean, interestingly, in the Philippines, as a really close look at how gay couples are surviving quarantine. And again, in the Philippines, Philippines on their streaming platform, I Want, Lovers in Quarantine, this extraordinary pressure that has been put on our relationships. So I think we will be seeing a great deal more of that. So little bit by little bit, Asia is certainly opening up for production, and that is good news.
Absolutely, it is fantastic news, and hopefully that's going to all carry on going in the right direction. Sabrina, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Great to have you on the show from Singapore. Tell us a little bit about your role before we go into your first story.
Sure. So hi, Justin. I'm Amanda. So I work for All3Media International. I've been with them for 10 years now, and the past 4 years I've been running their Asia Pacific office. So on the distribution side of the business, as you know, obviously All3Media as a group being the production group, but internationally we do the international distribution of all our series. So we take care in Singapore of all the Finnish program and all the formats adaptations for the APAC region.
Okay. How's All3 been coping with productions in Asia, both those formats and those productions? How have you been coping during the past 2-3 months?
So, I mean, as you can imagine, and as Amanda mentioned, and obviously as a group, our production companies have obviously suffered from the lockdown. Most of our production, or a lot of our production, had to stop and to pause. Because as you know, most of the production companies from the group are based in the UK and the US, for most of them, a few outside in New Zealand and Germany, but all of them have been affected. I would say, luckily for us, on the international side, we've still been able to run the business. We obviously have catalog to sell, and we, even in terms of 2020 production, we were lucky enough that we had a lot of production delivered already when the lockdown started, or at the post-production stage, which allowed us still to have a decent volume of content coming through. So yes, we've been affected. We just had to readjust. Format adaptations obviously had to pause. But even on the format adaptation, we may discuss that a little bit further later on, but we had assumed it would stop completely. And I think a very good surprise for us is that it didn't. We've actually seen a decent amount of activity and deal closing for various reasons, which I thought were very interesting, that we can get into if you want now. So we've had more format business than we thought we would. And on the finished tape, I suppose, a lot of broadcasters needed content, right? Because a lot of all their local production stopped, or their live event had to stop, or the sport. So actually, we've had to readjust very quickly what maybe we couldn't deliver anymore. And then equally, we've had to offer new content to clients to fill their schedule. So it's actually been overall challenging, but also a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
If you react quickly.
Yeah. And we've seen, particularly in the UK, but I think it's also going to be an issue in the US, but it seems to have been solved in France and some other European territories, is the issue of insurance around production, which we've talked about a few times on previous shows. Have we seen Asian territories dealing with that in a different way?
I've been talking already to a number of investors in the lead up to MIPCOM in October. It's a very real issue. Basically, the countries where there is government backing for production means that production can continue to resume. Now, we're talking about independent production. Of course, if you're producing something for a Netflix, for example, there will be sufficient funding to underwrite itself, if you like. But in terms of all independent production, it's a very real risk across the UK. Certainly, I know, because I've just come off a call regarding this, European territories now are underwriting production. So Austria, Germany, France are all steaming back into production. And it very much is the issue as to whether you have, whether you can actually secure insurance, because without insurance, you can't secure independent finance. And without that, you can't make a production. So it's very much an issue.
And how about specifically in Asian markets? How have the biggest Asian markets been dealing with insurance?
China, of course, has a scale that ensures that it is that it's largely independent of these issues. Again, a lot of the companies that we're talking about have very deep pockets. So China certainly is up and running again 100%. South Korea also has big funders and big support for their cultural industries through all of their various different government agencies. So certainly those two that are, if you like, in some ways leading the return, and you could argue that it is the insurance underwrite that is the very basis of that return.
Yeah, no, to be frank, so far, that hasn't really been an issue for us to move ahead with some deals in Asia. The biggest maybe challenge has been funding the shows, as obviously, the ad revenue has been difficult for all the channels. So that has been more the concern than actually going ahead. I suppose also what we've done very quickly is try to look at what production would be allowed in the various territories. And we kind of maybe divided it into three. One that we call the kind of lockdown or COVID-friendly format, where we could go straight away because the production method would be allowed within the lockdown measures. So would still be able to go ahead without really any problem. So some of those would be, for example, Gogglebox.
Yeah.
It's and as you know, obviously that's one of the series that we kept in the UK. We also got new series commissioned in the US on Fox. We had to adjust the shooting even for Gogglebox to respect the regulation. But that opened also opportunities in Asia, maybe actually for territories that would not have looked at it because it was in a way also a very good timing. So we also renewed some series. Mongolia, we've just we're doing a 10th series of Gogglebox in Mongolia, right? So they were happy to keep going during the lockdown. Formats again that we could do completely remotely that maybe featured people in their home, like another one of our showcase at your door, for example, that generated interest for that reason, or also Celebrity Call Center. I don't know if you remember, that was a show made for the UK. We actually, there is a deal in negotiation in the US, and that has actually now generated a lot of interest in the region, because people feel, okay, we can go ahead even if there is still some restriction in terms of the shooting, maybe insurance, etc. So it's also trying to think very quickly, okay, what are the programs that we could go and right now we can shoot? And then what I suppose we then need to look at when we and production companies is format that maybe are in a little bit less restricted than this in terms of shooting, but still maybe less, not too much audience, maybe not being shot outside. So anything studio related with no audience, for example, or very limited. So it's very quickly trying to adjust, basically. Okay. And also looking at maybe some content that the theme is relevant now. And a good surprise, for example, has been a lot of interest and offers on Undercover Boss.
Right.
And I have to admit, actually, that came from some of our client producers, because they're like, well, you know what? We didn't necessarily thought of doing it before, but now, as soon as the lockdown is ending, then, companies will need to look at how they're working and how can they improve the life of the employees. And we feel it's a perfect post-lockdown format. And also a good spin, I think it's important. There's a lot of difficulties in this moment, but as I mentioned, we also had deals that we didn't expect. And on the format side, where I mentioned we really thought the market would be completely dead and we wouldn't be able to. Actually, what we have found is a lot of producers could not produce right now. However, they wanted to be ready as soon as the lockdown ends. And they wanted kind of that fast track, right? They're like, well, we won't have a lot of time to start producing again when we are allowed to. We want to go straight away. We want to be in with the broadcasters and then be able to literally, shoot just straight away. So formats kind of allows that, right? It's like, okay, fine, here you go. We are skipping all the development stage. Scripted format also actually was the same rule as I've applied, where the channels and the production companies were like, well, you know what? We will need content to resume very quickly. We won't have months to maybe develop, or it's been difficult during the lockdown. Let's look at scripted formats. So I suppose that's just, some positive news, which I think were very needed and unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that anticipation, I think, isn't it, about how we're all going to be feeling in a few months' time, and what consumers are going to be looking for in 6 months' time, as opposed to obviously, those quick turnaround formats now. But interesting.
Just to add to that, because there's a real change that I've noticed. A lot of co-production filming has involved crews from Europe, the UK, or the US going to Asia to oversee Asian productions there on the ground. That now, because people have not been able to fly to do that, the level of trust has really increased. So it's become a much more co-productions where Asia is filming. It's become much more of a, we need to rely on Asian filming to be doing what it is that we want. In other words, everybody is coming together. It's much more a trust-based thing. It is no longer necessary for a DOP to oversee the work that is being done. And amazingly, it's very much shifting the relationship, making it much more of an equal co-production partners on the one project. And that's a terrific bit of good news, I think.
Oh, very interesting. And that obviously presents its own opportunities for Asian production companies as well going forward. So
very much
shifting that balance of power slightly. Interesting. Okay. Thanks for that. So Sabrina, your first story focuses on the Disney carriage discussions in Singapore, which seems to have been rumbling on for a while. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, I mean, I'm by no means expert in negotiation of channels carriage, right? So I'm coming in from a little bit more of a content side, I suppose. Obviously, negotiation have been, I understand, quite difficult, not just for Disney, but a lot of channels. Discovery also had challenges in 2018 when they were renegotiating their deal with StarHub, and then ended up moving to Singtel in Singapore. So I think what we're finding is that these negotiations have been challenging, and the pan channels have been worried of losing some carriage deal in several countries. And I think from, obviously, again, my point of view and perspective of content, that had implication and impact on our negotiation with the channels. Because in terms of what they're requesting, in terms of content, or in terms of the rights that are requested. Because pan channels, before would just take pay TV rights, but now under the pressure or worry of losing the pay TV carriage, then they also want to make sure they have all the VOD rights available, right? So they could shift to an OTT. If required, which makes complete sense. It just also pushes us to think about it differently. And then again, that brings challenges in terms of windowing, for example, because then all the rights overlap. So I just thought that was interesting, and another example of the shift between the pay TV world, especially in the pan territories, and obviously the growing OTT services. So it was really from that angle, I thought that was an interesting news, and it pushes everybody to think differently about the rights that we are granting, and also for producers, to be honest.
Absolutely. And this was between Disney and StarHub, is that right?
Yes. StarHub and Singtel, actually. So we have these two carriage in Singapore, StarHub and Singtel. So the negotiation was with both. And so far, the 3 channels are off air at the moment.
They're off air now. So there's no Disney in Singapore. Okay. All right.
So obviously that brings a lot of questions in terms of, what about the other Fox channel, for example?
Yeah. Okay. Well, interesting. Well, let's see how that develops, and obviously there's the added complication of Disney Plus, presumably, in that and the rollout across Asia.
Yes, they're still so they've in APAC. I would say they've launched in Australia and New Zealand. In India with Hotstar, obviously with the partnership with Hotstar, and they're launching in Japan on the 11th, actually. So very shortly. We don't have other dates for the rest of the region yet. At least I'm not aware of them. But yeah, the rollout will definitely happen. And again, I think all the big players are looking at VOD services because they simply have to.
Yeah. No, interesting. Well, there's a whole load of disruption happening in the region, so which is obviously going to be exacerbated by the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic from advertising and SVOD subscriptions. We've seen all that. Very interesting time. Well, again, we're going to be keeping our eye on many of those stories as we go forward. So, Amanda, your second story, we're visiting South Korea. Obviously, over the last couple of years, has become renowned as a hotbed of global entertainment. How has the country's TV industry been coping with the last few months?
Justin, good question. I would say in the same way that the country has been coping with the virus really very well is to answer that. Obviously, South Korea has experience with virus, but the extensive testing and tracing and the immediacy of the response really means that Korea sort of jumped onto this one very, very quickly. In terms of television production, it's interesting because there has been a lot of talk, of course, because Netflix now has resumed filming 2 big dramas in Korea, Move to Heaven and Love Alarm. And this has got everybody suddenly saying, Korea has resumed filming. In fact, Korea's always been filming, just as Sabrina said, filming has been going on in various ways. Now, in particular, there's been obviously a restraint on audiences. Audiences seem to have become generally a complete no-no. CJ have made, as the big powerhouse, if you like, of Korea, have made some notable adjustments. They one thing that was very charming in their comedy Big League, they took their comedians and put them into the audience and mic'd them up, so that they actually within their filming, the sort of contributors became part of the audience, and that gave a whole new element of sort of commentary and humor that really enhanced the program in the place of not having an audience. So that's a sort of a COVID adaptation that in fact may well remain as being more effective for the show as a whole. They did something called You Quiz on the Block, which they moved it's a man on the street quiz show. They moved it to video chats, which then had a focus on frontline staff in the hospitals and the doctors and whatever, again, to make it more topical and to really bring the content back to what was actually going on in the country. Obviously, everybody's wearing masks. Obviously, the social distancing. They had a big challenge on with a sort of fitness and brain power game show called Cashback, which is a co-development with Bun and Murray. They were shooting in April, just as everything was shutting down. So that's another example of where the entire production had to come from the CJ&M team, and the show altogether has been considered a great success. So there have been adaptations. There have been compromises to a certain degree. And clearly, drama, particularly with the big drama output that Korea is known for, I mean, it churns out these dramas that, are gaining an increasing foothold globally. Always there will be the protocols. The Korean Film Council is overseeing. There's got safety management protocols that very much are being followed. But on the whole, they're back up and running. And the news that was seen as being really good news was the Netflix, the 2 dramas. Really, if anything, it's Korea is a shining example of how we can actually get back very close to normal and continue our business.
South Korea has obviously dealt very well with this whole pandemic. And which is the territory that South Korea's biggest export partner when it comes to television?
Pan-Asia, I would say immediately. I mean, it's export of, there was a time, 5 years ago or so, when you'd be in Thailand and the main dramas on Thai television would be Korean, and the same applied all over Asia. I would say Korean dramas predominated. Sabrina, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I think it's a very exciting time to be in Asia because things are shifting so much. I mean, you still obviously have a distinction between the north of Asia and higher production budget, so Korea, Japan, China, no doubt about it, and India now. But what was true a few years ago, and I agree with you, Amanda, in terms of where Korean content would export. But now you have a rise of Thai drama, which are really good, and Thai drama now sitting back into China, Korea, which is great. All the countries are raising their local production. I mean, Philippines also, for that matter, and starting exporting, adapting formats.
It's interesting because Warren Buffett, of course, in the US, has said that if anything, this virus now has accelerated and advanced the Asian century. And I know certainly at the Bridge, we've been talking for a long time about sort of Asia rising. But if anything, now here is the proof that it's happening. And to add to Korean overseas markets, I mean, they have been working for a very long time to try to engage with US and UK markets. And I think it was very challenging for a long time. But now when you look at the success of The Masked Singer, and I Can Hear Your Voice, etc., it's very much becoming a country that's viewed as being a hotbed of exciting, interesting, different new formats. And the key thing that I find about Asia is that it's a phenomenal resource of stories and talent and locations and methods of storytelling that are new and innovative and exciting.
As well as technology, presumably.
It's only beginning, as well as tech. So it's only just beginning, I think. We could safely say.
Interesting. Okay. So, Sabrina, we talked a little bit earlier about SVOD. It looks like that juggernaut shows no sign of slowing down, according to your second story.
Yes, I mean, actually, it's true. The 2 stories are kind of linked from that point of view. I mean, like everywhere around the world, SVOD, you can't avoid it in the region, or VOD service in the region. And actually, a lot of numbers show Asia is at the top in terms of use of SVOD. China, obviously, and China was there before actually pretty much everybody else in terms of development, where the VOD services have been for a long time before the linear service and have more audiences. And in the rest of the region, again, there's been a big development in the past few years, and the development has been great on many fronts. It's been great because it's pushing, again, the production. So to get, very clear example, let's take India for, India. By Netflix investing a lot of money, and Netflix and Amazon, a lot of money into drama series, they definitely push the prices up a lot in terms of the production budget. But then that forced all the local VOD services to do the same, or at least try to match up. And by that, doing that, raising the level of production quality all across India, which which has been great. And that competition also pushed all the linear service and the VOD service to innovate. And the same, I would say, is quite applicable in the rest of the region. I mean, if we look at key platforms at the moment, I mean, Netflix obviously is big in the region, but depend on the territory, right? The reach is definitely not the same. Not as important. Amazon, same. They have a very strong presence in India and Japan, but very limited in the rest of the region. Mainly because it wasn't a focus for them, right? They had to focus on their strong territory in terms of the rest of their business. But they, as you may have seen, Erica North was appointed as the head of Asia Pacific Originals at Amazon recently. And, that appointment, she's incredibly experienced and shows that Amazon do want to grow the originals in the rest of the region. Netflix has had a very strong development for the past few years. They have very important offices in Singapore to cover all the region. And their goal is very much to focus on local content, right? And not content for Pan-Asia, because what does it mean, Pan-Asia? Not much, right? But to focus really on Thai content and on Korean content and, Philippine content. So that's really interesting. View obviously has also grown a lot in the past year. Also, they've appointed someone new, Virginia Lim, who used to be at Sony, as their new chief content officer. And they are also growing a lot of their local content. They actually have a lot of Korean content on View. I was reading an interesting article from Content Asia from 18th of April, where they use a report made by Media Partners Asia, saying that View dominates the streaming video consumption in Southeast Asia, way ahead of Netflix, iFlix, and Shein. Which is a Chinese VOD platform, during the lockdown period. And they show an example of, between the 16th to the 29th of March, View took 8 of the top 10 streamed shows in the region, wow. Which, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a lot of, like any VOD in any countries, there is high need for investment, and all the platform that launches won't necessarily survive. And we saw this recently with Hook, who unfortunately had to shut down. They were in 5 countries in Asia, and they ceased their business a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a really exciting time, and the local production obviously applies to all of these platforms. They know they have to have local content if they want to grow.
Yeah.
They will not grow with just acquisition.
I think that's a really important point, that the days when the West would send programming into the East and vice versa, and it is to a large degree, it's become an evolution now of local content and shared content globally. And it's very much becoming one market, one world, if you like, more than an East-West thing. And I think that those walls will just continue to come down.
I mean, obviously, we've mentioned a lot of formats. I mean, there are opportunities for finished program, less and less on linear. There is still a little bit, but free TV pretty much not, because people want to see what their local content, and if it's not from their country, it's from the region. So there's less and less place for English-speaking content, for example, on linear. But there are a lot of more also opportunities on VOD service. And I think one point that is maybe obvious, but there is a lot of content that would not have been seen on the linear channel that can be now seen on VOD service. Right? So anything that is more edgy will not have past censorship before. So it's also, that's why there's a lot of audience on this VOD service, because they also offer a content that would simply never been seen legally in the region.
Are we seeing then English-speaking content in a number of Asian territories more moving towards VOD, and domestic content being focused on very much more on those local linear channels and platforms as well. So it's actually starting to maybe marginalize English-speaking content into SVOD. Is that fair to say?
It's hard to, again, Asia is very, very, very diverse.
Of course.
So it's hard to say. But overall, and from, again, a personal experience at All3Media, I would say so. You're still going to have some English content, movies and Hollywood movies in some linear service. In Thailand, we still do a lot of business on all the paid channels. Obviously, also on the pan-pay channels, we do a lot of business. But a lot, maybe a bit more on the pay services around the region. Japan, however, I would say is still a very strong buyer, however. Because that's interesting because they have a very strong local market of Japanese content, but also we do a lot of business in Japan for scripted and non-scripted.
Yeah, well, I think what's clear is that, we knew this before, but you've certainly underlined it, that Asia is a region with many, many diverse territories that we can't really just cover off in one show. So I think in the coming shows we'll take another look at some of these territories more specifically and see what's happening there. And certainly Japan is a really interesting territory that perhaps doesn't get the discussion in an international podcast like this that it should. So that's something that we'll definitely look at. So Sabrina, now it's time to nominate your hero of the week and who you're going to be telling to get in the bin, who or what.
So let's start by my hero of last week. So I have to admit, it's older than 1 week old, but I only got to know about this story last week.
Okay.
And I was saying Justin, I'm going to say very positive and happy answer because we've had a lot of very upsetting and heavy news in the past week. So I've decided deliberately to focus on something positive.
Okay, thank you.
So I came across that lovely story last week of Tom Moore. I don't know if you read the story, obviously, in the BBC, but it's that gorgeous 99-year-old veteran who raised $23 million, right, in the UK.
Yeah.
And so I only came across his story last week, and I thought every time someone feels they're too, I don't know, little or too young or too old to do something and make a difference, he is the proof that at 99-year-old he raised 23 million.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit inspired and I've decided to take part in fundraising in Singapore and working in Singapore to raise money. So I did not raise 23 million, but I walked 100 kilometers in Singapore last week.
Wow.
There we go. That was my little...
How on earth do you walk 100 kilometers in Singapore? Are you doing circuits of the island? Or?
It's not that small. It is quite small, but actually due to COVID restriction or circuit breaker restriction, I could not actually go too far out.
Okay.
So I've been walking a lot of lovely walks along the water and exploring the neighborhood. But yes.
Oh, well,
there you go. So that was my little happy story.
Well, congratulations to you. That's fantastic. And it's great to see a veteran who was just literally doing something in his own back garden. Now it's proof that you know about him. He's a global superstar now.
He is.
Yeah.
All the way to Singapore.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yes. That's fantastic. Amanda, who's your hero of the week?
Mine is Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Look, nobody heard her name some years ago. She had a baby very shortly after she became Prime Minister, and it was as if nothing had happened. She handled the Christchurch mosque shooting with incredible sensitivity. She brought the whole country together instantly at a time it was really threatened. And they've announced now that New Zealand is fully virus-free and is back to normal, including big social events, etc. But what I really loved about it is, as she was announcing this, she said she'd done a little dance. And I thought, because she was so pleased that they had declared themselves virus-free. Obviously, they have a small population and they have a geographic isolation. But still, I just thought the woman deserved to do a dance, and she's terrific. And if there was more global leadership like hers and rather less populist, divisive leadership, we might be creating a better world for ourselves. So it's her that I think is terrific.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Well, I'm sure lots of us have looked on with admiration at her achievements over the last few years. And from a TV perspective, we talked with Girts last week about New Zealand really going out and pushing itself as open for business. Let's see if there's a boost in production as a result of that amazing handling of the crisis. Sabrina, tell us who you're going to be throwing in the bin. Who or what are you going to be throwing in the bin this week?
First thing, to go towards what I've said earlier, I'm going to throw in the bin every negative comment, post that I see on social media. I'm deliberately avoiding it. It's time for cohesiveness, for support, for warmth and cohesion and love.
Quite right.
And I'm completely against any opportunism taken by some people for divisiveness. That's an English word. And finally, as you were actually sending me that little question, I was probably finishing my second box of chocolates. So I've decided to put all the chocolates and cakes that I have in the house in the bin.
Oh, right. Okay, so you're putting on the COVID weight, the lockdown weight as well. I certainly am. I know that, but
68 days in my flat, Justin. So I think, despite the 100 kilometers, I can't justify the chocolate and cakes I've been doing.
Yes, well, if we do all make it to MIPCOM, I think the planes are going to need extra fuel to get us there. Maybe we're going to need a bigger town to hold us. Let's keep our fingers crossed that happens. Amanda, who are you going to throw in the bin?
Oh, okay. Mine's less humorous, but something that's really current over this last weekend. A man called Edward Colston, who was the slave trader. He was a key member of the Royal African Company. He was British, sadly. And his company was responsible for 80,000 men, women, and children being traded between Africa and the Americas. His was a statue that was up in Bristol. It was pulled down over the weekend in the demonstrations. And whilst nobody celebrates the pulling down of or any sort of mob rule, but the question being, what was he doing on a plinth in Bristol in 2020? And isn't it time that we took a good look in the mirror and came and faced the consequences of past behaviour as other nations have? So I'm going to put a notorious slave trader in the bin.
Yeah, well, quite right too, and hopefully all of the disturbances that we've seen over the world over the last week or so is going to affect some sort of change and make us look at the way that we carry out our business in daily life. So thank you for that. So Amanda, Sabrina, thank you both so much for joining us from London and from Singapore. It's fantastic to have you both on the show. Really enjoyed chatting, and we hope to see you in person very soon.
Yeah, thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much, Justin.
So once again, we're joined by Peter White from Deadline from Hollywood. How are you doing, Peter? How things settled down a little bit over there now?
Hi, Justin. Yeah, a little bit. We're starting to see some cracks through the window, which is nice. So we might be able to leave our houses sooner rather than later.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, so we obviously saw some hugely influential protests happening in the States and all around the world following the Black Lives Matter marches. Late night TV in the US is obviously hugely influential on the population. And there's a number of late night shows, obviously, that are famous around the world. How have they been covering off this issue?
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch what the late night hosts have been doing following the death of George Floyd and the subsequent protests. You've got Stephen Colbert, James Corden, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, Trevor Noah, Conan O'Brien. They've all been on this week in some form, and it's been particularly fascinating to watch. There's been a real shift in tone from these guys. I could talk about many of them. They've all done great shows this week. There's some real empathy and some fascinating guests on to talk about the subject. James Corden on the Late Show last Monday was particularly interesting. Starting off saying, why does anyone need to hear from him? But breaking that down a bit and sort of explaining that maybe this is an issue that white people do need to talk to white people about. The exec producer there, Ben Winston, called it the most emotional show they'd ever done. Late Night with Seth Meyers, they've been doing some great shows. They had Michael Che and Leslie Jones from SNL on, and actually one of their writers, a black woman called Amber Ruffin, who was the first black woman to write for a late night network talk show, was a prominent voice this week. She opened each episode of the show on NBC with personal story about how the police had intimidated her and threatened her. It wasn't played for laughs, but it was pretty powerful. You had Jimmy Kimmel addressing the topic of white privilege on his show, which airs on ABC. Admitting that he was initially defensive when he heard that phrase because he said he didn't grow up like a Donald Trump with a silver spoon in his mouth, and had sort of said that he'd rejected that phrase because he didn't really understand what white privilege meant. But sort of getting to the bottom of it, he sort of opened that up and said, look, I get this, and we as white people don't have to deal with the negative assumptions being made about us, based on the color of our skin. So he's sort of really interesting to hear him talk from that angle. And then you have the Daily Show's Trevor Noah, who is one of the few black comedy hosts on television today. He wasn't actually on last week, but he gave this incredibly powerful speech online, which was an 18-minute video talking about George Floyd, talking about all of the other incidents around America. The confrontation in Central Park, the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, the jogger. How all of these were sort of falling dominoes of a broken system. And Trevor Noah came back last night with an hour-long episode which talked about this issues as well, which, it's really fascinating to watch. The late night shows are the place where I think a lot of this really takes a different tact. They used to be comedy and they went really sober, but it was very powerful to watch. That was a fascinating look into that. And I did a few pieces last week. We looked at how it sort of changed from 92 when you had the riots in LA. I spoke to Arsenio Hall about those and how he covered that. His talk show was lauded at the time for the way it covered those and just looking at how these shows have dealt with these issues in the past. So I think we'll see a bit more of that this week, and it'll be interesting to see what comes next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's obviously a huge part of the national conversation, not just in the US, but increasingly so in the UK and around the world. So it should be, and hopefully that's going to move forward and create some sort of meaningful change on an ongoing basis. And this is not just a flash in the pan; it's something that's going to be a different discourse that we're going to have going forward.
I hope so.
So earlier in the show, we've been talking about Asia, and I see the latest Korean format to make it over to the States is making waves.
Yeah, absolutely. The Americans seem to be loving Korean formats at the moment, and particularly Craig Plestis, who brought The Masked Singer over, has had success in this. He's partnered with TBS, which is one of the Turner cable networks, for an adaptation of a Korean format called My Little Television. In the States, it's going to be called Celebrity Show Off, which has Maya Bialik, who was on The Big Bang Theory. She's going to host it. It's got a ton of celebrities on it: Diplo, Ja Rule, Action Bronson, Kevin Smith, Tori Spelling, the Willis sisters. Produced remotely, so it's going to be produced under the sort of coronavirus protocols. It's a funny format. It's sort of YouTube meets television. Basically, these stars are sort of competing to create their own digital content, and the most popular one will win. Essentially, it's a competition format, so they have to see who can get the most views, who can get the most engagement, and then whoever wins money for charity. But it is interesting how these Korean formats are coming over. Fox was in the middle of a show called I Can See Your Voice, which I think they had just started filming when the shutdown happened, which is also from Craig Plestis. And a few years ago, NBC did Better Late Than Never. So it's an interesting avenue. They're heading out that way, looking for formats that they've evidently done well. The Masked Singer is obviously one of the biggest breakout entertainment hits in the States in a number of years. So yeah, Celebrity Show Off is the latest.
So we'll keep our eye on that, the latest Korean format to make it big in the States. And we talked in previous weeks about big networks announcing their schedules and what they've been picking up. I see the CW have made an announcement today.
Yeah, the CW have picked up another international show. They've bought this Patrick Dempsey drama called Devils, which was originally commissioned by Sky in Italy. It comes on the back of them also picking up, they had the British comedy Dead Pixels, which came from Jesse Armstrong's company, and a Canadian show called The Coroner. NBC also had a Canadian medical drama called Transplant, which, it's just pointing in this direction that they're going to need shows to fill these gaps as production, remains shut down. The interesting thing with this, you sort of expected a sale, given it's got Patrick Dempsey. It's an English language drama. It was on the shelf. It was done. So I think the CW has done well to pick it up. It doesn't really fit their mold, if you like. It's a financial thriller. It's a little older skewing than their usual shows. But given that it's got an A-list star in Patrick Dempsey, or sort of most Americans know him as McDreamy from Grey's Anatomy, I think it will do quite well. It was a hot commodity sold by NBC Universal now that they took over Sky Vision. Speaking to some of those buyers and distributors, it's interesting. We expected a few more of these deals. I think that will come. I think there'll be a few more on streaming. But equally, the distributors, warned that I think the buyers are trying to look for a bit of a deal, given what's going on with the ad market, given the financial pressures. And I don't think many of them are willing to sell these shows at a cut price. But I think there's still a fair few shows out there that can, certainly from the UK, from Canada, and from Australia, that can help fill gaps. And we might see more of that as things progress over the summer and see when the US shows can get back into production. But given what's been going on this week, I'm still a little bit surprised the BBC drama Noughts and Crosses hasn't been picked up. That's being sold by ITV Studios, the adaptation of the Mallory Blackman books. Given it's a sort of dystopian future where racism divides society, I think it will be very interesting to see who does take that over here. It's got Jay-Z's Rock Nation involved, so that's the one that I expect to come sooner rather than later.
All right. Oh, well, keep your eyes out for that, Peter, and let us know next week when we catch up with you again.
I will do, Justin. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks for joining us again. So it's that time of the show where we go over to Riga to speak to Girts Licis from K7 Media, the Nostradamus of TV. How are you doing, Girts?
Hi, Justin. Yeah, I'm coping. Good. Hope to bring some more Nostradamus news this week. And still, as you said, still in Riga, still thinking when I'm going to be able to return to London. As obviously, I don't want to sit in a quarantine.
No.
In London for 14 days.
No, exactly. For everybody that doesn't know, the UK government has just started a new quarantine ruling for anybody coming into the country. So everybody has to spend 14 days at a particular address. We're not going to get many visitors until that's loosened up a bit. So hopefully that'll be over soon and we'll be able to welcome you back in. Girts, it'd be good to see you. Okay, so this week we're talking about Asia, and we were talking to Sabrina and Amanda earlier on in the show. Obviously, Asia is a huge and very diverse market, and it's difficult to lump it all into one territory. But it's like everywhere else, it's been hard hit by the virus. Can you give us a glance at the whole region, if you can, from your perspective?
Sure. No doubt Asia, as you mentioned, is a market with a huge potential, and also in our industry in particular. And I think it's needless to mention that around 60% of the whole world's population is living in Asia. But perhaps not everybody knows that, for instance, in 2019, 3 of the largest Asian platforms made as much original content as all global streamers combined. Asia is one of the fastest growing regions for us at K7 as business as well, which also shows that a lot of Asian companies are becoming more open to international business than they used to be. And this traffic we see, at least with our clients, is very diverse. It's not just trying to push their creativity, their shows for distribution, or in contrary, only acquiring. Increasingly, they are also looking to get involved in partnerships or co-productions, pre-buys, financing of the projects. It's a whole mix of strategies. And now there is still a lot of regional business too, of course. Traditionally, there are countries like Korea, China, Japan, India, and Philippines, which are considered the regional powerhouses of creativity, kind of. Korean drama or K-drama, for instance, is still working very, very well all across Southeast Asia, but so are Chinese, Thai, Japanese, Indian, Filipino, and also Turkish series. And when it comes to non-scripted shows and formats, the Japanese are probably the most prolific, but China, Korea, Thailand, Vietnam are also active in this space. And on the buying side, the top 5 format buying countries in Asia are Vietnam, Thailand, India, Indonesia, and China. But of course, this is not set in stone. And for instance, after the local version of Dr. Foster, which became a huge success in Korea recently, this traditionally export-pushing country has also started to express much, much more interest in Western scripts.
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit earlier. And so new productions, they're going to have to wait a bit, right, depending on where they're actually being based. But can you take us through that?
Well, yes, just quickly speaking of the current situation and the COVID pandemics, China and Taiwan seem to be in better shape than the rest of the Asian countries at the moment, followed by Japan and South Korea. Mongolia and Vietnam are also back in production, but with strict social distancing rules. Hong Kong is suffering particularly hard, also due to the political situation, as you know. And in India, the government has established the necessary protocols for the film and TV introduction, but Mumbai specifically is severely hit, and sources there expect that the production will not be able to start until July. Thailand has a restriction of 50 people per production set, so most big entertainment shows are on hold. And same situation is in Indonesia, where the big formats such as MasterChef or The Voice and also Indonesian Idol are all off air. However, as a very interesting exception, I should mention the production of The Voice in Mongolia, which started to air in January and continued broadcasting with a special government permission all this time through, with a show's host presenting the program via video link from Singapore, where he found himself stuck due to travel restrictions.
Wow. Okay. Now, how about some more specifics on each of those main markets?
Okay. China. When looking at Chinese TV market, it's important to understand what isn't allowed to air. NRTA, or the National Radio and Television Administration, has put quantitative restrictions on numbers of certain genres of shows, the length of episodes and seasons, and in which slots certain shows can air. The impact of these regulations has made the linear broadcasters in China rather unwilling to air foreign finished tapes of any genre, while imported formats are not allowed to air on satellite TV in prime time, which is between 7:30 and 10:30 p.m. For other time slots, only one season of an imported format is allowed to air during the course of 1 year. That said, even just recently, a remake of Fremantle and Psycho Entertainment's talent show The Greatest Dancer launched in May on Dragon TV in China as The Magnificent Dancer, bringing together a host of local talent as they give the performances of their lives in the search for China's greatest dancer. Online programs were previously less subject to regulation than broadcast TV, but internet restrictions are now rapidly catching up with linear TV. And streaming platforms in China cannot make acquisitions of foreign finished tape of more than 30% of the total amount of programs aired in the previous year. However, in terms of foreign scripted and unscripted format adaptations, to date, there is no regulation over it. And last year, China bought 25 formats, 13 of which were scripted, with 7 scripts coming from the Japanese Fuji TV. And we also see that there is a growing appetite for factual programming in China and by proxy elsewhere in Asia. To date, celebrity-led food series and travelogues have been the most successful reality genres in the region. But now other areas like parenting are growing rapidly in popularity. Also policing fixed rig has emerged. And even property shows, once deemed irrelevant in China where home ownership is rare. And with a slowing economy and sponsors looking for lower cost programming, we can expect that shows featuring real people and social issues will come further to the fore in China. And then speaking of India, which is another huge market, it's very much pay TV dominated, with pay TV making up to 80% of the overall video entertainment market spend and is still expected to grow in the coming years, particularly since pay TV subscriptions in India are very, very cheap. And at the same time, already by the end of this year, India is expected to become the third largest SVOD market in the world, just after US and China. Currently, there are more than 40 subscription-based VOD platforms in operation. One of the challenges in India is the multiple languages spoken in the country. Programming on streamers like Disney Plus Hotstar, for example, are run in 17 different local languages. And another peculiarity of the Indian market is that it is very much scripted-driven, drama-orientated market. It's always been. It's in the culture, probably also due to the long-established Bollywood tradition. However, recently it has been definitely shifting towards more contemporary high-end drama, particularly now with the global streamers investing in local originals that include legal drama, thrillers, teen drama, and even horror, like the recent Netflix original series Betal, which was released in May and is set in a remote village where the Indian police is fighting an undead army of British soldier zombies. Since the demand for scripts is so high, India is definitely a very prospective market for adapting scripted formats. It doesn't really make a big difference where from, as long as a great, unique, well-written story. For example, just recently, India has picked up the rights for the Ukrainian crime series The Sniffer, which, by the way, has already been produced in the region by Japan's leading broadcaster NHK, where it became the first scripted format adaptation for the channel. But of course, there is also always place for good entertainment. Even Disney Plus Hotstar has already launched an online dance competition show, Home Dancer, and also just next week, the evergreen Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is going to return to India for its 12th season already.
All right, so that's touching on China and India, but Korea and Japan are probably the best known for their creativity in the Western world, right?
Yes, I would say that Korea has worked on it very, very hard for a decade or so, and on all levels, including the support from the government to become what it is now in terms of worldwide recognition of its creativity. And in my opinion, it is as much thanks to this very methodical approach to the country's marketing as it is due to its creative muscles. They have very much approached it as a business and always try to be fresh, different, and a step ahead of others. Currently, for instance, they are putting a lot of emphasis on creating hybrid formats, blending several genres together, like talent and dating or variety and dating, for example. And this is maybe not what the rest of the world broadly accepts yet, but such formats may certainly appear to be more bulletproof in times like these. Koreans can be also very flexible in adapting to circumstances. For instance, they have a very popular travel and food reality show, Restaurant on Wheels, which normally brings their top chefs and celebrities traveling and introducing the world to Korean food. But during the pandemics, they very swiftly launched a spin-off called Restaurant on Two Wheels, introducing foreign, in this case Italian food, to Koreans instead. And Japan, in its turn, has always been famous, obviously, for its anime as well as its crazy, funny physical game shows. And one of the most recent successes is Blockout, a game show co-developed by Nippon TV and Red Arrow Studios, which has been popular in Asia already for a couple of years and now is also starting to travel further, with pickups in Spain and the Netherlands announced just recently. And in this format, two teams of four battle against each other to hold on to a wall comprised entirely of moving blocks while dangling over a bottomless pit.
All right. Well, we'll keep our eyes out for Blockout then, moving across the world. That sounds an interesting new physical game show. Are there any other Asian markets we should keep an eye on in particular?
There are many, but if I have to mention one, I would say Vietnam. While neighboring countries like Thailand and the Philippines are also eager to look outside, we expect Vietnam this year to become one of the most promising buying markets in Asia. COVID aside, local series are on the rise, which is putting producers under higher pressure to find good stories. And this is presenting a huge opportunity for international scripted formats in Vietnam. And game shows are also remaining popular. 2019 saw several new regional streaming players like Tencent's VTV, Ichi, and iWonder enter the market. And at the same time, Netflix launched its Vietnamese language interface and updated its library with more local movies. And with governmental crackdown on piracy and improvement of the online payment infrastructure, I think we'll see Vietnam's streaming market in particular flourish this year and beyond.
So with so many territories and so many streamers and linear channels, etc., in these disruptive times, in your opinion, are there any specific business strategies implemented by any of these players in the Asian region that stands out to you and could maybe worth learning from?
Well, one of the most interesting strategies I find is the approach to local content in Indonesia, among some other countries, by Iflix, which is a regional VOD, which is specifically focusing on the developing Asian markets. So what they are doing is taking local movies pretty much straight out of the box office. For instance, some 30% of the Indonesian box office is on Iflix exclusively within 90 to 100 days from their premiere, and straight away commissioning a TV series from that movie with the same cast, the same director, the same crew. So in a way, they are riding on the back of the success of the movie and its marketing, and at the same time, the viewers are getting movie quality development in TV series, in many cases for the first time in these markets.
Interesting. So they're using the box office to create the IP, and then they're driving TV shows straight from that. Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Girts, interesting as ever. Thank you so much for your look at the Asian region. We look forward to catching up with you again this time next week.
And me as well. See you next week.
Well, that's about it for another week's show. Thanks as ever for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and give us a rating in Apple Podcasts and share it with friends and colleagues. Keep the messages and suggestions coming in and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We've just launched a whole load of new advertising opportunities on Telecast, so if you are interested in promoting your brand or products or content through Telecast, please get in touch with me at justin@boomdialogue.com. That's justin@boomdialogue.com. We'll be back with another show next week. So in the meantime, as ever, stay safe.